Hello, welcome to Mandibil. This is it's part 6 of my deconstruction of Keith Frankish's series on illusionism. And this time we are, splitting open the second lecture called The Case Against Qualia. And to my surprise, it's almost 2 hours long to, to present the case against Qualia. It's like, okay, so that might point in the direction just of the handle here, right? That it's not that easy to argue Qualia away, right? And I would also say that if you want to call something an illusion, you must be referring to some kind of experience, right? He can say that, okay, it's an experience, but it's not important. It doesn't give you anything. It's an illusion. It's just something that appears, but it has no significance of any kind. But he can't say that there are no qualia, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't. He would have to say qualia. What qualia, right? What are you talking about? No, so he doesn't refute that you are experiencing colors and sounds and so on, right? He just says they have no significance. Or at least that's what I would, draw from the idea of an illusion, right? Now, there's a problem also in using the term illusion, because if you're thinking of what's it called, a magician who pulls a rabbit out of a hat, right? And then that's an illusion in the sense that where the hell did that rabbit come from? But there's some trapdoor, whatever they do, right? And the illusion is that it looks like something that couldn't possibly occur because you haven't had that experience before at that kind of causation, right? But then it's referring to something else. There's another understanding that it violates it's only because you do not have the full picture of what is going on that it looks like something is being violated, right? Or it's sort of it's an interesting thought experiment. Well, okay, but I can't know what's going on. I can say to myself, there must be some trapdoor, whatever, right? And that's sort of the whole trick and the illusion or the imagination that runs with it. That says, okay, but maybe it is magic, sort of, right? But when you say the qualia is an illusion, what are you comparing it to? An illusion, if you say it's an illusion, you're sort of, okay, they're there, but they're just, it's just a funny spectacle or some kind. So usually an illusion is something that references something that shouldn't be able to happen, right? But in this case, it's not really an illusion. It's just something that happens that shouldn't happen, according to, or maybe not that shouldn't happen, but that's something that happened, but it has no significance. So is that the term illusion is not really correct in this connection, I would say, right? So this sort of, I don't know, an illusion is something that is purely mental, right? So it's like, an illusion is when you have an idea of what's going on that isn't correct. So it's an idea of something. So it's an idea of qualia that is something that shouldn't be there. I don't know. You could, fabulate for hours about this, right? And so, and I also want to mention that I'm very hung up on work at this. I'm not working extra hours, but I'm spending a lot of time being concentrated in my work, and I'm not necessarily that have that much energy left in order to do these kind of videos here, right? So it might be, it might take a few days longer to get through this than that I've first, planned. So I started in a new job a little more than a month ago as a sort of a project manager, but I'm actually, I wouldn't even say I'm a project manager. In some senses I am, but it's almost like I'm, a level above project managers, right? I'm sort of in a staff function where I'm all over the place, right? It's sort of it's a curious job I've got, right? It's very challenging, and it's at times a bit frustrating. But in the overall structure, the company I work for is sort of basically sort of a medium size, sort of a four-figure number of employees, somewhere, maybe 4,000 or 5,000, somewhere along that number, I would think, right? I actually don't know the exact number, but it's sort of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, somewhere there, right? And my nearest manager, or the manager just above me, right, is a level 3 manager, right? So it's like I'm she is sort of, no, actually she is a level 2 manager. She's level 2 manager because the CEO is level 0. She is a level 2 manager, so I'm basically on the level 3 sort of management level in a sort of a mid-sized company, right? I'm not a manager. I'm not actually managing anybody. But on the other hand, I'm working for a level 2 manager, helping her manage various aspects of, management, particular within research and development. So it's sort of it's a curious, job I have, right? So it takes a bit of, being able to switch around from task to task. And now I'm spending 1 hour on this, so I have to get to a meeting and I spend 50 minutes on that, and then I did some third thing and a fourth thing and a fifth thing. So sometimes I can get sort of half a day concentrating on something, and then something happens and I have to, quit that and get into a meeting, and it's this kind of, so it's so at the end of the day I can be a little, not that I'm sort of drenched or anything like that, but I'm sort of drained a bit because I'm very focused on making the best effort I can, right? So, but that's another story. Let's get into what Keith has to say, and I hope I can get through it without, making 40 or 50 videos or something like that. But let's see how it goes. I possibly can't help myself, stopping him, after a few seconds.
Hello, I'm Keith Frankish. Welcome to the second lecture in this course on the illusionist view of consciousness. This lecture is called The Case Against Qualia. Just to remind you of the plan of the lectures, last week I introduced the problem of phenomenal consciousness. The problem, if you remember, is that consciousness seems to involve direct awareness of mental qualities, qualia, phenomenal properties, what it is, likenesses. And these properties seem strange and mysterious, and explaining how the brain produces them seems to present a hard problem.
Again, another indicator that he doesn't understand the paradox involved in his metaphysics is he's talking about brain. How did he get access to a reference, or that which he references he calls a brain? That's also an experience, right? It is at least it's based at some point, if not now, then from some memory of somebody talking about something that they have experienced. There cannot be anybody arriving with any knowledge without having an experience of it first, right? That would be mysticism, right? So, okay, if you're a mystic, okay, fine, but that tells us that you're a mystic, right? If you're not a mystic, but you're sort of an empiricist, well, there has to be some experiences to get to knowledge, and any experience has to be based on the qualia. So you say qualia, just some weirdo stuff going on, but brains. Well, how the hell did you get to brains then, right? Do you have a sixth sense or a seventh sense where these sort of concepts arrive, or what, right? I don't, right? All my experiences, all my insights of any kind has been based, unless you're talking about, desires and emotions, and things like that. But again, they have also been based maybe on some kind of experience, right? They have evolved or developed from experiences, or in order to react to, or some kind of handling of experiences. be that from your body or from the external, right? It always comes back to these qualia, right? No matter how you turn it around. So it's just incredible that a presumably, decently intelligent person and, studied philosophy and so on cannot see this problem. It's mind-blowing to me, right?
Problem. And I briefly sketched some responses to that problem and outlined the illusionist response to it, which is that these properties don't really exist. They are a sort of introspective illusion. Now
Again, there's these adjectives, right? It's not just an illusion, it's an introspective illusion. Okay, so it's a specific kind of illusion compared to what other illusions, right? So it's like, to me at least, it's an indicator that this is sort of a fabricated explanation by putting adjectives on in order to differentiate itself from other kinds of philosophy. So it's sort of an introspective illusion. Has anybody used that before? Okay, so I can, I can have a patent on that one, right? So, and create my own little subsection of philosophy over here. And it doesn't explain anything, just combining words in ways you like in order to, create something that seems to be able to stand alone while it can't. It's just, combination of words. So, again,
I just explained what the illusionist position was. I didn't try to argue for the position there. But in this lecture and the next one, we're going to look at the case for illusionism. Beginning this week by looking at the case for rejecting the alternative view, for rejecting realism about qualia, phenomenal properties. Okay.
But realism, you need to explain what you mean. You can't just pop up out of a box and say, hey, qualia is just an illusion. And then think at the same time that everybody understands what realism is and all these other things that usually is connected somehow with qualia, right? So it's like the big picture, but he's only talking about this little section over here, right? And very thoroughly it tries to refute it or argue. And the rest is just, everything else is just, everybody knows that, right? But this little particular, I have to be very careful, tell you that it's not like you think it is, but the rest, of course, we don't have to discuss that, because everybody knows what realism is, right? So it's like, no, this is not good philosophy. You have to start from the ground up and say, okay, this is my starting ground. Okay, now I'm taking this leap of, I wouldn't say leap of faith, but leap of philosophy maybe, right? And saying, okay, I'm stating this as an axiom, or this is a definition, or whatever, right? And sort of argue your way to your next stage, right? You can't just say realism and then you have made philosophy. That doesn't work.
Let's begin again with a little story, the tale of the pickle jar. So, I like pickles, and I'm making myself a sandwich, and I want to add some pickles to it. So I go to the fridge to look for the pickles. I open the fridge, and I scan it from top to bottom, looking for the pickles. And I can't see them. Where are they?
Why can't you see them?
Sure, they were in here, but I can't see them.
You know what you're looking for, right? I don't know what you're looking for. You look, but what is in there? Now it's a small picture on my little screen. I have, it is divided into the streaming software and the window, so it's not the milk and the tomatoes. Looks like a Greek yogurt or something. Yeah, he lives in Crete, right? Is that Greece? Nice filled cupboard, right? He's been at the grocery and stuffed the fridge full of stuff, so that you can't spot whatever it is he attempts to say that you can't find possibly, right? Let's see.
I turn and call to my partner.
Oh, yeah, quickly, close the cupboard. or you can't look any further. So you're sort of trying to figure out what it is, and then he pulls away, right? So you have to say, oh, maybe it was an illusion. Maybe it wasn't there.
Where are the pickles?
Where are the
The
pickles?
answer comes back.
In the fridge. Just look. How does she know?
I turn and
Maybe
have another
somebody
look
stole
in the
it.
fridge. And this time, there they are, staring me in the face. Right at the front, on the top shelf, in the middle. How could I have missed them the first time? Well, now I have my pickles. But I've also got a puzzle. Because I think to myself, when I first looked in the fridge, the first time, what was my experience like?
Well, your experience was that it is a fridge that is stuffed, right? And why do you have an expectation apparently that there should be pickles in your fridge, but that doesn't mean there are pickles in your fridge, right? If you don't identify pickles, then for all you care, there are no pickles in your fridge. There may be two solutions to that. Right? Either there are pickles in your fridge, but you didn't identify it, or there are no pickles in your fridge, right? You can't judge one from the other.
I could go back and re-inspect my experience of the fridge. What would I find? What was there in that region of my visual field the first time I looked in the fridge?
Maybe you didn't look hard enough, but you can keep, if you say, well, I can't find the pickles, okay, then you can keep looking, right? You can say, I can't find the pickles. You can keep looking, I can't find the pickles. You can keep looking and keep looking and keep looking and keep looking and hoping that the pickles turn up. At some point, you're going to say to yourself, I don't think there are any pickles here, right? So they might be there, but you haven't identified them. But just because you haven't identified them doesn't mean that they aren't there or that they are there, right? Neither of them. It's only when you do experience pickles that you can say there are pickles in the fridge, right?
I'm not asking if I could go back and look at the fridge again. If I could, then I guess I'd see the pickles. I'm asking if I could go back and re-inspect my experience of the fridge. What was there in the top center of my visual field? Was the pickle?
No. You can't re-experience past experiences. You may have a memory of it, right? You might have a memory or some kind of diffuse sort of echo of what you. If I went to my fridge now, looked into the fridge, came back and sat down here, I wouldn't have the same impression, as you would call it, as I have when I stood looking at my fridge, so to say. But I can sort of, if I sort of make my inner recording, I could say, well, yeah, there was something red and blue, and there was, my peppers and my chili and my yogurt and my honey and whatever I have. I had chicken in my fridge, right? So it's like, I could remind myself, but that's not an experience. Those are not qualia, right? Those are not qualia. Those are memories, right? The memories might be able to trigger. So if you think of the color green, for instance, you can sort of imagine the color, but you're not really experiencing green, but you have sort of a recollection of the color, right? So it's sort of a faint version, the idea of the color, you could say, maybe to also stay in Hume, right? So, but this is sort of an important thing he's delving into here, in my opinion, right?
Pickle jar there? If so, how did I miss it? Why didn't I notice it and take it? I mean, after all,
No, but it may be camouflaged, right? It's camouflaged in all the other stuff that you have in that stuffed fridge, right? If the pickle jar was the only thing in your fridge, you would be hard pressed to miss it if it was actually there, right? If the only thing you could see in your fridge was a pickle jar, then you would be hard pressed to miss it. But because there's all that other junk in your fridge, it's camouflaged by the other junk, right?
experience is what the world is like for me. And if in that region it was like a pickle jar, and I was looking for a pickle jar, then...
And this is also just points in the direction that you need to objectify the world. Your knowledge of whatever you call it, the world, whatever, right, is limited by your mind's ability to objectify it, right? The mind is cost effective. It doesn't objectify everything. There are things in the periphery, or that it's sort of, it doesn't objectify as strongly as it does something else that is sort of in the middle of the focus of your experience, right? So that's where your main, but if something weird happens in the corner of your eye, so to say, then you might turn and look at it in order for that focus to point in a direction. So if you see something you would think it is an elephant or a tiger, you wouldn't keep looking in this direction. You would turn your gaze toward it, so you would be better at making sure that you are objectifying things more efficiently, right? So the mind would be overloaded, I think, if it completely objectified everything that was in the visual field, or whatever, right? And this has been optimized so that you focus on that which is important, which is sort of an after effect of evolution, I would say, right? Well, that's just a theory. That can never be sort of a philosophy as such. It's a theory, right? But if I had to explain it somehow, I would say it's based on evolution, right? So, and it's not evolutionarily advantageous to objectify everything all the time, but rather be able to focus on that which is important for whatever end you're working or you are having this experience, right? So, yeah.
Why didn't I react? Or was there a blank in my experience at that point? Was there a hope?
You can't know that. Why are you not saying, but I'm not experiencing a snake, right? Is there something, if you say there's a snake in my fridge, right? And you go look, I can't find the snake. But why can't you find the snake? So your mind is incorrect because there isn't a snake in your... How do you know what is supposed to be there? Well, you have to be there and experiencing in order to say that it's there. Even if you just put the pickle jar into the fridge and slam the door and then say, I think I'm going to look, 2 seconds later if there's a pickle jar in there. You can't say, I know there's a pickle jar in there, because you're not experiencing pickle jar. You have to open the fridge and look at the pickle jar and say, or look and experience, or I should say, objectify pickle jar. Then you can say, there's a pickle jar in the fridge, right? If you close the door again and you say, well, I'm going to take the chance that there's a pickle jar in the fridge, even if I don't look, fine. That's your judgment. I also do that all the time, right? Otherwise, I will have to stare into the, fridge all day long, right? So I have to take the chance that now I can go get a pickle jar and have the knowledge of pickle jar until I have eaten all the the pickles and so on, right? I don't have to stare at it all the time in order to be sufficiently safe in my decision that there's a pickle jar in. But in order for me to know there's a pickle jar, I have to experience pickle jar, right? And in order to experience pickle jar, I have to have the qualia, right? The color, the green color and the whatever, right? So if you didn't have colors and sounds and smells and shapes and whatever is a part of that qualia, you do not experience pickle jar. I mean, why is this so difficult for this dude. Do you understand?
Whole, in my experience? And if so, what color was it? Was it white or grey or black? And if there was a hole there in my experience, why didn't I notice?
So because his wife, or whoever it is, one of his female students, I don't know, saying the pickle jar is in the fridge, is that his knowledge there's a pickle jar in the fridge? Because wifey says so? That's not knowledge, right? Somebody telling you something and referring to an object is not knowledge. That's not your knowledge, right? And if she's not looking into the fridge, she doesn't have knowledge of it either, right? So knowledge has to be based on experiences. That's why these freaking quailias are so important, right? And that's why this philosophy here is never going to fly. It will take him 2 hours attempting to refute qualia as being, useful for anything, right? So 2 hours? Why does it take you 2 hours to do this, man, right?
It is that. Wouldn't it have seemed rather strange to look in the fridge and find a blank at a certain region in my visual field? Did my brain perhaps fill in that region with something else, something else from the fridge, other than the pickles? It seems rather puzzling. Yeah, well, by the end of this lecture, I'll have an answer to that puzzle to suggest to you.
At the end of the lecture, why don't you give it to me now? Or soon at least, right? Why? This is interesting, but I'll tell you about it later, right? That's not the interesting conclusion here, but I'll tell you in 5 hours, right? So it's not coherent either, right? It's sort of, oh, this sounds interesting. And do you want the answer? No, you're not. You're going to get it in 8 hours of lecturing, right?
So let's move on now, and I want to begin by introducing the person who has, more than anyone, articulated and defended the case against qualia. And this is Daniel Dennett. And in this lecture, we're going to be looking at arguments from his work. Let me just begin by saying a little bit about the word illusionism. I coined the term illusionism in a paper I published in 2016, and I've tried to promote the position and get people interested in it. But it's not a position that I originated. The ideas in various forms have been around for quite some time, and many other people have defended them. Some there.
Well, can you go all the way back to Plato, or maybe Socrates, and even, pre-Socratics, that, the cave is the qualia, the whatever is put in front of you, right? But you should go and find the forms, the real thing, not the real thing, the one thing, the true shape of thing, not some arbitrary instance of pickle jar, but the concept pickle jar. That's where the real stuff is, out in the light, and find the true thing, right? Sort of, it has echoes of illusionism, has echoes of Plato's and maybe Socrates. It was Socrates' metaphor, right, or analogy. What's it called? The cave story, right? The cave analogy.
Brian Farrell, George Ray, Dirk Pereboom, Richard Rorty, and many more.
It's like, okay, it's not only me. I'm not alone here. So you're also fighting Brian Farrell, George Ray, and Dirk Pereboom, and Richard Rorty, and Daniel Dennett. They're all illusionists. You should not attack only me. If you want to attack, you should attack everybody, right? Because there's more than one of us, right? So it's also this appeal to power, appeal to authority. There's a lot of, high-flying academics who also support these ideas. So therefore, it's more correct. It's a sort of a what's it called? A supporting argument, that there are more that support the same argument. That makes it a better argument. No, it doesn't. That's a fallacy, right? Even if you're the only one in the world arguing for it, it doesn't make it either good or bad, right? It's an argument is an argument, right? Philosophy is a philosophy. So you don't have to bring in and say, oh, these guys also say so, and this guy also says so, and so on, right? It's sort of a sign of weakness, I would say.
And one person, above all, has made the case for the illusionist perspective on consciousness. And he's made it with great intelligence, knowledge, wit, and eloquence. And that is Daniel Dennett.
Great wit and knowledge, and he's my Santa Claus, right?
He, more than anyone, can claim to be the originator of illusionism. He is, we might say, the master illusionist. And here's a photograph of Dennett from the 2014 Greenland cruise.
Yeah, Santa Claus is on Greenland, of course.
Dennett is a professor at Tufts University in Massachusetts. You can find out some more about him from his website at this address. Now, Dennett is a prolific author. He's written many books and articles on many topics, many philosophical topics, particularly in philosophy of mind and cognitive science, but in other areas too. In this lecture, we're going to look at extracts from just 4 of his publications. Quine Qualia, a classic paper first published in 1988 and reprinted many times since. His book on consciousness from 1991, Consciousness Explained, a major contribution to the literature. A follow-up book on consciousness from 2005, Sweet Dreams. And his most recent book, From Bacteria to Bach and Back, published in 2017. Now this should be enough to give you a flavour of Dennett's case against Qualia. Before we get into the arguments, let me just briefly introduce a couple of concepts that are important in Dennett's work. One is the distinction between personal and subpersonal psychology. It's a distinction between different kinds of psychological explanation, different levels of psychological explanation, and by extension between different kinds of psychological state, or different kinds of mental state, if you like. Now, keeping it simple, we can say that a mental state is a state with content that's about something. So beliefs are mental states with content. Beliefs are about things. You have beliefs about the weather, about politics, about your schedule for the day, and so on. Desires are mental states. Desires are about things. You have desires. You want to go on holiday. You desire something to drink, and so on. Experiences, again, mental states, and they're about things. You have experiences are experiences of things. You have an experience of seeing an apple, of tasting coffee, of hearing a beautiful song. So mental states are about things. Now, at an ordinary everyday level, we talk.
They're qualia, right? And you called it a beautiful song. You didn't just call it sounds, but you called it a song, and it was beautiful. Like it has some kind of meaning to you, and it gives you some kind of pleasure. But it's just an illusion. So you're eluding yourself by calling it a song, and it's just, why? I don't get it, man. I mean, are you going to tell me that, yes, you have these qualia, but they have no significance? They're just a freaky show of some kind, right? It's just psychedelia or whatever. And then you're talking about nice songs and, you like pickles. Why do you like pickles? Do you like the idea of pickles, or do you like the taste of pickles, right? I mean, what the fuck? What is he attempting to do here, right?
About people having mental states like this all the time. We talk about people having beliefs, desires, experiences, hopes, fears, and so on. And this is how we make sense of each other's behavior, by ascribing these states to each other. And these states are personal in the sense that it's persons who have them, people who have them. Here are some examples: believing that Paris is pretty, feeling pain, wanting to go on holiday, seeing an apple. These are descriptions of things that people, states that people are in, things that people do, as opposed to, say, things that their brains do. So it is I that want to go on holiday, not my brain. Though maybe my wanting to go on holiday is dependent on things that my brain does. So mental states are first and foremost states of people. But it's become common in psychology and cognitive science to talk about our brains and brain systems having something like mental states, having representational states, representations of features of the world. We talked about this last time when we discussed the computational theory of mind, the idea that mental processes involve computations over symbols, and that a computer could be thought of as having mental states in that sense, could be thought of as having a computer has symbols that represent states of the world, numbers, say, or in the example that we had there, the presence of dogs and times of day.
I'm just thinking, just sort of a low practical approach, right? Why is his eyes open, right? Why don't he just close his eyes? It doesn't matter. The qualia he's getting is not important. They might even trick him into thinking they're important while they're not. Why don't he sort of cut off his ears like Van Gogh did, or stuff his nose with chips like in A Fish Called Wanda or something like that? Why doesn't he do that? Why don't he close his eyes? Why don't he put on some goggles and paint them black or something, because he might be confused, right? And stuff some, carrots in his ear, something like that. So you don't get all this confusing, qualia. Right? And why is he talking? Because I need to hear those qualia in order to understand what the fuck he's saying, right? So the qualia he's creating, the voice, is an illusion. So he's trying to elude me somehow, right? I shouldn't listen to him. Should I? Because the qualia, the sound, no, it's an illusion. I mean, and I've been looking at the presentation, yeah, I should close my eyes and not look because it's an illusion. It's sort of, what the fuck, right? What's the matter with this dude, right? I mean, it's fucking crazy.
And the mental processes can be thought of as computations performed over those symbols. So,
and he's talking about these computations and what is going on in minds and the brains, and how the hell did he get to that? Right? Did he hear about it? Did he see it? Did he experience it? How did he get to understanding of brains and so on? If he didn't get it from an empirical, sensual perception of some kind, how the hell? I mean, okay, he has the qualia, right? He opens his eye, gets some qualia, but then he says it's an illusion. But isn't he using them still to, both make this presentation to me and finding his freaking pickles, right? I mean, he did buy the pickles, didn't he? They didn't sort of pop out of nowhere and just appeared in his, fridge, right? So he went down outside somewhere and, had to use his senses in order to find this fucking pickle jar and then, bring it home and put it in the fridge, right? And he couldn't do that without using his fucking qualia, could he, right? Maybe he can't find it in his fridge later. But in order for it to get to the fridge, if he sees it, he must have used his qualia, right? So why is he using his qualia to get the freaking pickles if it's an illusion? What's the matter with him, right?
So in this sense, we can talk about brains having something like mental states. And the term that Dennett introduced for this is subpersonal mental states, states of
So my personal beliefs, they are outside my brain or what? The green area? And the subpersonal is representational states of brain systems? What? Personal beliefs are floating out here somewhere? Can I see them? They're green apparently. So I can where are they? I can't. Oh man, right? I mean, please tell me where I get why I don't get this. Why it seems completely loony. This, right? Tell me where I get it wrong, right? What is he doing? He's creating these drawings I have to experience using my qualia, right? And then he at the same time say, no, it's an argument against qualia. He's using qualia to against qualia. Oh. Isn't it funny just to know that there are people who possibly are forced somehow, way or another, to pay for his shitty life, right? So he can sit here and, throw this weirdo philosophy at you, right?
systems of the person. So examples will be representations of colors, shapes, faces.
What's a representation of a color? So if I'm experiencing blue, is that a representation of a color? Or is it in itself a color? A qualia, right? What is a representation of a color? I have the experience of color. Is that a representation? Or how would I know? Because I need to have the color before I can say that it must be a representation of something, right? So I'm just sort of, okay, I have blue, right? Okay, and that's a representation of something, of a color. But what does that mean if blue in itself is a color? So it's a color that is a representation of a color? What the hell, man? I mean, it gets... I'm actually surprised how crazy this sounds, right? And lo and behold, this is what you get when your metaphysics suck, right? If you haven't got your metaphysics right, and I bet you it's because of this inherent paradox that is built in basically, in particular in physicalist or, materialist, dualist, whatever. I'm actually a kind of a dualist, I would say, but let's put that aside. The materialist view, the physicalist view, right? That there's this dualism that things are always two places and ones, and one of them is lesser than the other, right? And it's always the one you have access to, like the qualia and colors. Those are not they're not important, right? That's outside. The other one is the important one, the one you can't access. But I can tell you, man, right?
And other features by the visual system. So the idea is that in visual processing, the visual cortex in the brain has separate systems for detecting various features, things like motion, shape, color, and more complex features such as faces and for recognizing objects and so on. Now, these aren't personal mental states. It's not that I don't when I see the apple, I don't separately see the shape and the color and the distance and so on. I just see the apple. I just have a complete experience of the apple. But my seeing the apple is due to these processes, these subpersonal representations of discrete features. So we can say that personal mental states exist in virtue of subpersonal ones. What I mean by that is that all of these separate representations of features of the apple add up to my seeing the apple. Okay. My seeing the apple isn't something extra over and above all those. It's the sum of all that activity. The subpersonal representations in my visual cortex.
How do you know? How do you know about these goings on if you only have access to the apple when you experience the apple? And that would refute that you know it's an apple before you experience it as an apple. You're saying it's outside yourself, and then it travels through your eye, and then there's an experience of apple. First of all, there's no need for that experience if you already understand there's an apple outside your mind. And if you say, no, you have to have the experience, well, then how do you know there's an apple outside? And if the apple only appears as an objectification in your mind, then it can't be outside, right? Then it's inside. Then you don't know anything about anything outside. You can't have your cake and eat it too, right? You can't have it both ways. You either have to say I have access to that outside, and then you have to say I don't I don't need my experience. And then you will have to explain why the hell you have an experience if you already know what's outside yourself, right? If you're saying I need to have the experience in order to know there's an apple, but then you can't have the experience can't be the apple, right? The experience is the apple, but that experience is inside your mind. Then it's no longer something you can say that is outside. Not just like that. Then if you say it's something outside, well, then you're saying my experience inside my mind is also outside my mind. That's bullshit. It can merely be a representation of something that could potentially be outside. And you can decide for yourself, I'm going to go with this is a representation outside myself, right? This is a bullshit philosophy. It doesn't work. It suffers from this lack of insight of good metaphysics, which is identifying this inherent paradox in common thinking, right?
Amount to my seeing the apple. Okay, so similarly, my having beliefs and desires and other states is a consequence of subpersonal representations of various kinds. The important point to stress here, though, a point that Dennett stresses many times, is that there may not be a simple correspondence between personal mental states and subpersonal mental states. So when I believe that Paris is pretty, that may not correspond to some single representation, some single subpersonal representation, something sort of written down in a belief box in my brain saying Paris is pretty. It may not be like that at all. My belief that Paris is pretty may be constituted by a vast collection of partial representations of Paris, representations of bits of information about Paris, memories of Paris, all kinds of bits of subpersonal information about Paris, which collectively add up to me having the attitude to Paris that we describe as believing that Paris is pretty. Okay. So a belief or experience may be supported by a complex set of overlapping and partial representations of various kinds. And that's quite an important point to bear in mind. Okay, now let's just come on to qualia here. Does experience, seeing the apple, say, involve more than having subpersonal representational states of various kinds and the reactions that those states produce? Does it involve awareness of mental qualities, qualia, as well? Well, Dennett gives a firm answer to that. No, it doesn't. And in this lecture we're going to...
that is a firm answer, but you don't have to argue anything. Just say no. Okay, because it's, Greenland, Jesus, right? Then just say no, right? Okay, I know it's just referencing possibly a larger explanation that Dennett has made, but he just, extended himself to say, Dennett says no, and you just have to accept that, because it's his guru, right?
To look at some of his arguments for that view. Now, I want to preface this by saying something about the notion of qualia that Dennett is using. In his classic paper, Quining Qualia, he notes that qualia are often described as being ineffable. We can't describe them, what they're like in themselves, intrinsic. They're not functional properties. We can't characterize them in terms of what they do. They're private. No one else can observe them. And they're directly apprehensible. We're immediately aware of them. There's no kind of intervening mechanism or inference.
No, that sounds decently, correct, right? I think I would, say I would agree on that, right? Ineffable, that means that you can't explain yellow, for instance, right? And if you have, if you're trying to tell people how a beer tastes, for instance, or a wine, you have to refer it to something else that has a particular taste. It tastes like licorice, or it tastes like oak, or it tastes like plum, or whatever, right? You can't say it tastes meh. Then people wouldn't know what it is. So it has to be referenced to an object that has a particular taste. You can say, okay, so it tastes like licorice. Okay, so I understand what you mean when you say that this wine tastes like licorice. But you can't define the taste by other than an indirect reference to something else that has that taste, right? And that it has a significant, like licorice has a particular taste that is sort of not a mix of something else, or they're sort of alone, or what you would say, right? It's you know what I mean, right? So if you have notes of licorice in your wine or in your beer or something like that, you can say it has notes of licorice, and then people would know what you're talking about, or at least they would have an idea, right? They wouldn't know it, right? For obvious reasons. But you can't describe a taste. You can't describe a sound, right? You can say there's a sound. Okay. How would I know? The sound is inside you. It's not out there, right? So you can say there's a sound. If somebody else hears a sound and you say there's a sound, they could say, I also hear a sound. And we can agree that it's possibly the same elephant that makes that sound. Whatever, right? But then we'll have to say it's the sound of that elephant. Or it's the taste of that beer. Or it's the color of that banana, right? We have to point and say object, reference to qualia, right? And that's ineffability is that you can't put a word on it and then define it, right? Maybe you could, but I don't think it would work, right? You have to say it's the same as that other object that has that color, right?
But his case against qualia doesn't really turn on that.
I might add, intrinsic. If you say that an apple is red, it's not, the apple is red because that's the representation that is in your mind. But if you're saying the apple that I'm saying, that object that is outside my mind, which I do not have access to, but I'm saying that the apple is referring to, has redness, then I would be wrong, because the redness is in my mind. The mind has to create the redness, right? It's intrinsic to my objectification or my concept, but it's not intrinsic to that object if I say it originates in an object outside myself, right? Because it had to travel through my eyes and so on, had to be constructed as apple, apparently, right?
That description, or they're having all those features. People sometimes say, oh, well, then it just argued against qualia in this strong sense of properties that are ineffable, intrinsic, private, and so on. If you look at the arguments, as we will do, I think you'll see that they don't really turn on all of those features. Dennett's challenge is to ask believers in qualia how they know their qualia. how they know what their qualia are like.
What? First of all, if this is metaphysics, you can't use the term know, right? I might have misused the term also, but you should be careful not using the term know, because that's the same as knowledge, and knowledge needs to be established using epistemology. And if this is metaphysics, you can't just jump into claiming knowledge without having done some epistemology, right? You should know that. You should understand. Yeah, you should know that. You should understand that as a, possibly a skilled, educated philosopher, right? You can't just throw around knowing just like that. And how do you know qualia? Who says you can know qualia, right? But what does it mean that they exist? What do you mean that qualia exist? But what is it? What is the understanding of existence, right? Damn.
And he shows that there are significant difficulties in knowing what your qualia are. And then the implication of that is if you don't know what they're like, don't know what they are, then why think they exist at all? And that's the core argument behind Dennett's case against qualia. Now, Dennett makes his case against qualia by using thought experiments, imaginative scenarios, intuition pumps, as he calls them.
Oh, intuition
to bring
pumps. I'm been pumping an intuition over here. So now I think qualia is such an illusion. Yes, I have an intuition. Oh, so it gets fluffy, right? So you can't just argue in any rigid manner. No, I have an intuition pump, right? Something I invented. You can't see it, you can't experience it. You can't use your qualia to get to my pump. But I have it, and I'm going to enlighten you.
But to highlight problems with the notion of qualia, and he's developed many of these, very ingenious and enlightening examples.
Oh, I get it. You are a fanboy. Okay, you're a fanboy. Sure. Then, no problem. I mean, yeah. But, if I'm a fanboy of anybody, it's David Hume, right? Not because I'm reading all that Hume has done, but there's a certain insights I really respect from Hume, 300 years, almost 300 years ago, right? The treatise of human nature. But this guy's like, well, Daniel Dennett is much more important than I, and he says, and I like it, and he has been pumping. So he answers no, because he has an intuition pump. Yes.
We're going to be looking at several of them in this lecture. They all tend to make the same point, but they make it in different ways, and I find that some of them work better with some people and others with others. So we're going to run through a few to see which work best with you. Okay, one other term.
Okay, we are closing in on 1 hour, and I would like to keep it under 1 hour so that it was upload automatically to Odysee. So, heterophenomenality. You will have to wait to hear me deconstruct that until part 6, I think, which is the next one. This is part 5. Otherwise, like, share, and subscribe, and all the good stuff. Check out the Discord link below, and leave a comment. And otherwise, have a very nice day. See you next time.